Welcome to the Wiser and Older video series. This series was recorded at a live presentation. As a result, both the video and audio production are not perfect, and we apologize for that. But the content in this series is so valuable and the tools so powerful that we felt it was important to give you the opportunity to experience them. In particular, this video, It's Not What You Say, It's How You Say It, was a workshop designed for the Central Oregon Dental Hygienist Association. Although specific to their industry, all the information and tools can easily be applied to all communication in general and communication with seniors in your particular line of work too. Because this workshop was interactive, there will be times when you will hear questions and comments from the audience. Sometimes you may not hear the questions as clearly, but again, the information was too valuable to cut. We thank you for your understanding. Enjoy the workshop.
Yeah. Well, that's true. The reason communication is so hard with computers is because true communication is a feedback loop, right? We'll move to the next slide, maybe. No, that didn't work. Oh, there. Oh, okay. Communication is feedback loop. I communicate, you hear it, and respond to me. That response gives me an idea of whether or not you understood what I said. Take this scenario, for example. There's a construction worker, goes to a doctor's office, opens the door, goes up to the receptionist, and she says, "Well, good morning. Why are you here?" And he says, "I have shingles." So she proceeds to take his name and his address and his medical insurance cards and asks him to sit down and have a seat. He does, and about 5 minutes later, a nurse walks in and says, "So, what do you have?" And he says, "I have shingles." And she says, "Oh, okay." And she does his weight and his height and starts to take his medical history and has him waiting in the examination room. And about 5 minutes later, another nurse comes in and says, "Why are you here?" And he says, "Well, I have shingles." And she says, "Okay," and does his blood pressure, takes a urine specimen, tells him to take off his clothes and wait for the doctor. And about a half an hour later, of course, the doctor comes in and says, "So, what do you have?" He says, "I have shingles." The doctor says, "Oh, really? Where?" He says, "Out in the truck. Where do you want me to put them?" So, that's a little example of how the meaning of your communication is the response it elicits. If it's eliciting a response that does not make sense to you, that means not that they are stupid or dumb or they're just misunderstanding what it is you are saying. And it's up to you, the communicator, to restate it in a way that the response that you get is what you expect, because that's telling you that they do understand. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. I have to move over here and move over there. I know. So, and as an overview, I want you just to know what you can expect today. We are going to learn about basic communication, something that you already know, something that you already do unconsciously, but I'm going to help bring it to the conscious so that you can use it anytime you want. We are also going to, I guess I could read it from here. Learn how to communicate with a person who is upset. Do you ever have that in your work? Okay. I know I am probably one of the kind of patients you guys can't stand, because I just hate going to the dentist, I'm sorry. So I'm the one who has to have the laughing gas and everything else to keep me calm. But if you have clients who are upset, I'm going to give you some tools to help you to get them over that. How to give bad news without getting shot. The characteristics and values of a seniors and how those are different from other age groups. And the unique communication habits of a senior. And then we'll take a break. And when we come back, we're going to go into another area of seniorhood, which is working with someone who has dementia. Because I imagine that, just the fact that somebody's a senior isn't enough to really change your behavior. But if they have dementia, then that's something that you really need a little bit more skill in communicating and dealing with. So we're going to work with that too. I want you to know that this is a very experiential class, and so I want you to just feel free to raise your hands, yell out an answer. I'm good with that. I love taking questions and scenarios. I think that you learn better that way when you have, so if you have something that, an experience that you've had that didn't work out as effectively as you would have liked to, and you want to learn specifically using that one what you could do, I'm happy to answer those questions. And if you just need to get up and take a break or go to the bathroom, if you need to stand, you're responsible for your own comfort, okay? Good, all right, so everybody thinks that communication is really about the words that we speak, right? No. Communication is only 7% words. It's 55% body language and 38% voice. So that piece right there is the building block of building rapport. When you understand that really it isn't what you say, you are communicating the minute that you become, you are part in somebody's presence. And you are communicating through your voice, the tonality of your voice, the speed of your voice, the pitch of your voice, the inflection, the monotone, and also in your body language. So many of you, and I'm sure you will agree, that you have walked into a room and immediately felt something. You walk in and everybody's happy, and whether you might be like kind of not in a good mood, but you walk in and you feel better. Or the reverse, you're feeling really good and you walk into a room and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, somebody just splashed cold water on you, right? That's because all this underlying communication, nonverbal communication is taking place. So you already do this, as I said earlier, unconsciously. When you are comfortable and you know the person you're with, you easily build relationship and build rapport. Rapport comes from the French word, am I in your way standing over here? Okay, I felt like the French word repartir, which means to bring back to. That's the actual literal meaning. But what it really relates to is this characterization of harmony and affinity, accord. What you're saying when you have rapport on a nonverbal basis is, I understand you, I like you, I respect you. That's what's coming across. And the minute that that comes across, you're very comfortable. So when you think about a time when you have been in a restaurant and you look across the room, I'm sure you've all seen the couple that's sitting across from each other and they're both kind of leaned in and they're smiling and they're talking. Everything's just sweet. That is rapport, right? You've also seen that same kind of couple where the husband's sitting here eating like this and the wife's looking over here like this and that, right? Have you seen that too? That's not rapport. And you are also very skillful at breaking rapport. For instance, if you were say on a car lot looking at cars and a salesperson comes up to you and his goal is to sell you a car and build rapport. So he's using all these masterful skills and you are doing everything you can to break rapport. You're looking at your watch, you're turning away from him, you're doing everything unconsciously to say, I don't want to like you yet because I want to have my own little space so I can make up my mind whether I want this car or not. So these are all things that you already do. What we're going to do now is teach you how to make it conscious. So in order to do that, I like to have people have the experience. I'm going to break you up into groups of 2. So if you would, count off A, B, A, B, A, B. Let's start over here.
A, B, A, B, A, A, B, B, A, B, A, B, 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 A, B, A, B, A.
Come play. Thank you. Aw, that's sweet. Okay, so you want to come have a seat over here and play? It won't hurt, I promise. All right. So, here's what we're going to do. A's, put your hands up in the air for me. Thank you. So A's, you are going to just simply talk to your B partner. Just about anything you can talk about, what you had to do to get ready for today, or talk about yesterday, or talk about what you're going to do this weekend, or who's coming for Thanksgiving, whatever you want. And B, all you have to do is listen, okay? And when I say time, I just want you to freeze. I don't want you to move, just wherever you are, just stop. like that old tag game. Okay? Ready? Go.
I can listen from here.
Oh, you know what? Here, she doesn't have a partner. Right there. You guys. There's two. So you are two together? Okay, and then, all right. Freeze. Good. Okay, now just notice, I want you to first, before you move, just notice how you're sitting and how your partner's sitting. I want you to just kind of look around the room and just start telling me, raise your hand, tell me what some things that you noticed and things you felt in doing that exercise. Yes.
We're sitting almost identical.
Very good. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, okay, good.
Very comfortable.
Very comfortable, yeah. What else? Was it hard to just listen and not respond?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, especially for women. Very hard.
But she responded with gestures and body and just looks on her face, and, but then at the very end she even had to talk. And she was supposed to.
Oh, and I'm wondering whether you were doing that because you wanted to say something and you couldn't. Yes, of course.
And I was kind of laying on her.
Right.
But
And without going into too much detail about the difference between men and women, but you know, women do respond. We cannot listen to another soul without some kind of response, whether it is simply a oh, yes, or words. So just for a little aside, when you're talking to your spouse or partner, and he's a man, he doesn't do that as naturally as we do. He wants you to get to the point. So he gets very frustrated with that. And so if you teach him by just saying, you know what, you don't need to answer. All you need to do is go, Truly, you will feel better. I promise you, you will feel better at the end, and he will feel so successful, he'll do it again that way. So.
male patients of ours.
Same is true with male patients. They're not going to respond the way that women respond. They want you to get to the point. They don't want the laundry list. Okay, where women are like, take a look at this, and then take a look at this, and then take a look, right? Men don't want. No, it's like to the point. Now that's done. To the point.
My husband has a saying, he goes, "You're building a watch, and I just asked you what time it was."
Yes, yeah. See, perfect. I like that. I'm going to use that. I like that. Wow. Okay. So getting back to this was pretty comfortable, pretty easy to do. Yeah. Okay. So what I wanted you to notice that you guys did was that your body language was similar. And if you would have looked around the room before you moved too much, you would have noticed that you guys were kind of leaning into each other. Some of you were sitting a certain way, and your hands were close to it. There was this intentional feeling of camaraderie that was going on. That is what you do very normally, very unconsciously, kind of like driving a car. When you first learned to drive a car, everything you did took thought. You know, you had to remember to put on your seatbelt, to look in the rearview mirror, to do every single thing. Now you get in the car and you can put your makeup on, talk on the phone, and you don't have to think about it, right? And you wonder, how the hell did I even get here? I don't even remember the drive, right? That's how unconscious we are. Well, it's the same thing when it comes to rapport. We are unconscious when we do it with people that we know. But it is when we are doing it with someone we don't know that we because we're not comfortable with that person, we don't build rapport easily. So I'm going to give you those tools today. Let's do another exercise. This time, B, you are going to be talking. A, you are going to be listening. But B, I want you to be talking to A while standing. Okay? So B, stand up. Again, you can talk about anything you want. And yeah, they can talk back. They can talk back. But primarily it's B's story, okay? So they can respond, but not take over the conversation. And do it until I tell you to freeze, and then stand where you are when I freeze you, okay? Ready? Go. Freeze! Oh, you guys are so good. Thank you. All right, now look around the room. Notice what you notice. And let's get some feedback. From those of you standing, how did it feel to stand and talk?
I wanted to sit. Yeah, it's more comfortable to sit.
Yeah.
I wanted that.
Can you get more specific? Why did you want to sit? What was it that you were feeling inside?
I felt like I was better than that person.
Ah,
I felt intimidated. I felt like all the attention was on me, and I didn't really want the attention
Interesting,
to be on me.
okay.
I wanted it to be a two-way.
right. Okay. Yeah, it was funny. Some of you actually, you two here, I saw you kind of actually stepping back, like distance would make you more even, you know, because getting closer.
She has more distance than the others do.
Yeah, you know, because now just step 2 steps in. How does that feel?
Yeah, it's a little more.
Uncomfortable, right? Yeah, right. Okay. And those of you sitting then, how did it feel for you? What was your experience?
It just seemed like that you were like having to look up instead of be on that eye-to-eye level. Yeah.
I think it was harder to connect with what she was saying.
Right.
I felt like I was having to listen very carefully.
Right, right. Very good. Okay, have a seat. Thank you. So that is an example of not being in rapport. Okay, so you all felt what it was like to be in rapport, and you were comfortable with that. And now you had one experience of what it's like to not be in rapport. And this was a simple shift of body positioning. Okay, now I want you to think about what you do. You're a dental hygienist. You're in a chair that is usually higher than them. So right off the bat, you are not in rapport. Now, sometimes that's effective. And I'm going to ask you guys, for those of you sitting, did you feel that the person who was talking to you was kind of a person of authority, or felt like a person of authority? You know, like a teacher who's presenting. If I was presenting from a chair, it would have a very different feeling. My credibility would go down in your eyes because I become one of you. Whereas if I'm standing in front of you, automatically you think I'm great. Thank you for that. Right? So that there was that feeling of that person has authority. So sometimes that is appropriate. Sometimes you want the person in your chair to know that you're credible and that you have that authority. But it also may be a detriment if that's the only place from which you speak to them. And you can see why, right? So if you can bring your chair down, which I think you can, right? You can bring your chair down. When you first meet your client, it would be better for you to build rapport from a position where you are even eye to eye. Because that, and let me add this, if it's a senior, even lower. Okay? Because, I'll ask you to do this for a second. Stand up, B's again. Stand up for a minute, please. Now get down on your knee. If you can physically do that without hurting yourself, just get down on your knee to your person.
One or two.
Just one, just down low enough. And she's still taller. That's all right. Maybe you can switch. Yeah. I mean, I just want you to see what that feels like for a second. See what that feels like for a second. Just even without talking, just being there in that position. You know? You got to propose. So one time you'll see a man on his knees, right? Okay, get up. Thank you. One of the things One of the things when I was an in-home care agency provider, and at the beginning I did everything, of course, because anytime you own a business, you do it all at the beginning. So I would go out and I would meet the clients for the first time, and always, I would come and I would approach them on my knees. I always came in and started from this position, which really was hard on my knees. But the reason that I did that was because I knew that from the start, I was giving them power. I was placing them in the place of authority, which is really important, especially with this generation of 70 to 90-year-olds, because they tend to give their authority away. It's one of their values, which you'll learn later. They give authority to those that they believe have it. And so by being in this position, I am letting her know, you are the one in control, you are the one with the power. And that, especially in what I was doing, because I was coming in to say, you need help. So giving them power and control was really important. And it was something I taught my caregivers to do, which is why I think one of the reasons we were so successful. Because it was amazing to me how even nurses didn't know that. And how most people, when you meet a senior, they're going to be sitting. They're going to be in a wheelchair, or they're sitting in a chair, or they're laying in a bed. And most people will approach them like this. Hi, dear.
Hi.
Oh, doesn't that just feel crappy? Yeah, okay. So positioning is really important. So when you are working with your clients, especially the very first time you're trying to build rapport consciously, you want to make sure that you are matching them in their eye level. So bring your chair down to talk to them and make them feel at ease. And then when it's time to start working, of course you're going to have to go back up. But by then, you will have built a relationship with them. Right? Well, yes.
What if you already know this person or you've already established it? So how do you go about changing your confrontation?
You don't need to. What? Right? I mean, if you already know this person and you already are comfortable and you know they're comfortable with you,
What if you feel that they're not quite comfortable? How do you change that situation?
then you go back into rapport. You build rapport.
Okay.
Right. And you use the skills you're going to learn today, which are pacing your body, your voice, and your words. Okay? And without giving you too much more before it's ready, let's go to the next exercise and you'll see I'll give you some more tools here. All right? So this time, A will talk and B will listen. And A, you are going to be fluctuating your voice. Okay? So I want you, as you're telling your story, it might start out at this pace, and then all of a sudden it'll go really fast, and then it'll get really loud, and then it'll get really slow and low, and then, oh my God, yeah? Okay, it's gonna be fun. You can do this. Okay? And B's, all you're gonna do now is just listen, okay? And then go until I tell you to freeze. Go. Freeze. Okay, that's very good. You guys are very good. Give yourselves a hand. That was hard to do. Okay. So everybody come back. There we go. So tell me a little bit about what that felt like. What was hard about it?
Keeping your thoughts going.
Distracting.
Yeah. Just keeping your own thoughts going so you can continue talking. It's hard to do.
It was very hard to
Thinking
do.
more about, do I need to change my volume now? Do I need to...
Right. Okay. So that rarely happens in real life where you are undulating your own experience in your own voice. But it is not uncommon that you are talking to somebody who speaks differently than you, right? So especially if you're working with a senior, they tend to talk a little bit slower. And what do we do when someone talks slower?
We talk louder.
We interrupt. Exactly, we interrupt. We talk louder. It's weird why we do that. I don't know, but we do. We start to feel impatient, And we are definitely disconnecting and breaking rapport with them, okay? Sometimes we also tend to speak higher, in a higher pitch, which is another bizarre manifestation. I don't know why we do these things, but it's like we're trying to pull them out of that slow thing, I think. It's like a tug of war with their voice, rather than matching them, okay? But it is a big, huge piece. It's 38% of your communication is with your voice. Have you ever had somebody say to you, oh, God, stop yelling at me? And you're like, I'm not yelling, right? My husband says that all the time. And I know I'm not yelling, but I'm really expressive. And so for him, that expression feels like yelling. It's so much bigger than the way that he talks. And at that moment, I'm out of rapport. And typically, I'm so excited, I'm also standing above him. So you can imagine how that feels, right? In fact, he once said to me, this is a really great example. We were having a really nice conversation, and I got cold, and I went and stood in front of the fireplace. So I continued talking while I was warming my hands in front of the fireplace. And all of a sudden, I started noticing he's not talking as much. I'm like, what's the matter? And he goes, I just feel like you're like my mother. And I realized, oh, geez. And I come and I sit down again, and I'm like, I'm sorry, let me start over there. And he's, oh, that's better. But he didn't know why. It was because I was standing over him, like what his mother might have done when he was a little boy. So it's amazing how your body and your tone of voice has such a big effect on the way that you can get your message across. So are there times in your business when you notice that your voice is hampered? Yeah, it's like you're not, it's different than it's normally, or maybe not coming across as well as it could, like when you're wearing a mask, right? So that's something to think about too, that when you're wearing a mask and they can't see your mouth, and it sounds a little bit different to them, and you've got, this is going on and all this other stuff going on, especially for seniors who may have trouble identifying different sounds around them if they have some hearing loss. Yes?
I automatically, when I have a senior or an older person, or a person of my age, who I look to see if they have hearing aids,
Right.
and if they do, when I talk to them, I'll look at them, and then I take
your mask off, right. So that is, again, those little things will make such a huge difference when you're working with your clientele, right?
And what I have to really do is make my boss aware of the fact that he's wearing hearing aids and he can't hear, so look at him when you're
Yeah.
talking.
Too bad their dentists aren't here, huh?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's another class. But very good. Sometimes they don't wear their hearing aids. I cannot tell you how many seniors I worked with that just refused to wear their hearing aids, partially because when they got them initially, 10 years ago, it was the old models, and they just don't understand that today technology is so different and so much better, that the issues that they had with them before are not the same, and they wouldn't. Yeah.
And sometimes in our chairs, they will take them out because when we have our arms up, they'll get feedback.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's good. They say, they make right. Yeah, so you're going to have to use your body language, which is 58% of your communication, right? To communicate even more so with these people than to use just your words. And again, when you pull your mask off, they can see your mouth, so that's going to help them too.
I think you need to accentuate your mouth when you talk a little more. The only reason I know that is I had a gentleman that was deaf that I worked with since I was like 12 years old. He never could hear, but he could read lips.
Right.
And it
right.
taught me really how to do that. It helps amazingly with patients.
Yes.
So,
And so you do want to talk slower so they can read your lips. And because they are also talking slower, so that builds rapport with them when you do that. And then you also need to be aware of the register of your voice, because as we age, the higher sounds are the things that go away faster. And yet, if you think about the way that we talk start with babies. How do we talk? Oh, my sweetie, it's all that high pitch, like, but have you heard adult people talking to seniors that way too? All the time. And it is first of all, it's so out of rapport and so disrespectful because it is insulting. And please don't ever call them honey and dear, because that also is insulting. They're not your honey or your dear. But also because they don't hear that sound as well as the lower registers. So if you have a naturally higher register and higher pitch voice, you're going to have to work on bringing it down. So I could talk up here like this, or I can talk down here, or I can talk down here. It's amazing what we can do with our voice. Play with it as you're working with them. Yeah. Okay? Let's try another one. This time, A's are talking, B's are talking, A's are listening, and A's are talking. No, they can sit this time. A's are talking, B's are listening, but as you listen, B's,
No, it's opposite. B's are talking.
A's are talking.
A's are talking.
A's are talking.
B's are talking.
Who was talking last? A's. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so this time B's are talking, yes? And A's are listening, but A's, while you're listening, I want you to do just distracted facial expressions, hand gestures, just, like movement, constant movement. Okay? You ready? Go! B. Time. Freeze. All right. That's always the one that's the most fun. Isn't that fun? So how did that feel?
Uncomfortable, no eye contact.
Okay, uncomfortable. No eye contact. Yes.
It was hard to focus on what I was trying to say because she was so distracted.
Right. Very distracting. Yes.
When I was doing it, I kind of thought about when patients, when we're talking with them and we leave to make a note on our computer,
Uh-huh.
that clicked in my head.
Oh, very good.
I'll leave, I think we're done talking, and then they'll start talking, and I'm typing and trying to do my computer.
Very good. Yeah.
So that's a good point.
That is a very good point. Yeah, see, I don't know all the nuances of your work, but being able to extrapolate this information and see how, when you do that, you're breaking rapport. It's no different than if you and I are in a conversation and I look at my watch, okay?
My computer's behind them.
Oh, even worse. So I'm like, yeah,
But my keyboard.
right. Okay, so how would you get around that then?
I'd probably take a keyboard with me, because I have two computers. One
You
in
could
front
do
of them.
that, but you could also,
Just listen first, but don't keep talking.
all right, well,
5 minutes,
Yeah.
at the end, they're
Yeah,
done.
just do it at the end.
Yeah,
That's what I do, because I'm such a slow typer. I wait until I'm all done, take little notes on a piece of paper. And then when we're waiting for the dentist to come, then I go, okay, I'm gonna go
See, I
ahead
don't
and
get to
enter
wait
this.
for the dentist to come though, because I go to my next patient
Right.
and they do it.
so here's the thing.
It's hard.
It's only breaking rapport because you're not telling them what you're doing.
Yeah, I was just
Right?
gonna say.
So if you were to say to them, just hold that thought, because I'm really interested in what you're saying, but I need to make a note on something right now before I forget.
Okay.
When you are informing them what you're doing, you're still within that rapport building thing. It's when you cut it off unexpectedly
Yeah.
that the flow isn't there anymore.
I just started noticing that point with my patients because my keyboard is like right alongside of them. So, and I have to get up because it's on this side of the chair instead of this side of the chair where I sit. So I get up and I go over here, and if all of a sudden they're like looking at what I'm doing, and I'm going, oh,
Right.
I'm making some chart notes, and then the doctor's gonna come in. And that
Yeah.
just kind of like, they go, oh, okay.
Yeah, and if you think about it, I mean, there's another little piece in that we're probably not adding, which we should, because it's not the same as if you and I are having a conversation and having tea, and I turn while you're talking to turn off the stove. okay? That, although I am kind of breaking rapport, that is something you don't question or consider as a problem. But in this case, I'm your dental hygienist, I'm your nurse. And when I take away time to go over here and put a note in, like, well, what's that note about? What are you writing down that's so important that you don't want to forget that's about me, right? So now all of a sudden, there's that other piece that's the unknown that makes us afraid. That, so if you can even go as deep as, can you hold that thought? I'm just remembering I want to leave a note here that says, that I took care of this tooth, or that whatever it is that you're noting. So that you now have taken away that piece of worry too, right? Okay. So the random gestures thing is an exaggeration, again, because we don't all talk like that. Although I've been accused of presenting with my hands too much, which can be very distracting to those of you who are watching me. But it is important that we recognize that gestures do play a part, and expressions. Because if you are a person like me, I'm Greek, I talk with my hands, I have a lot of expression in my face. But if I am working with a senior who is kind of sedate and moving slower and quieter, and I want to be in rapport with them, then it is a conscious effort on my part to sit still. And I can do it. And to move slower. And to match my whole cadence and rhythm of my body to them. But I could just as easily hang out with a bunch of teenagers and be rocking and rolling, right? So the key is to have that fluidity and that flexibility in your own communication style.
A lot of my seniors are really chatty, and it's hard to break away. I think they're lonely. They've known me for 16 years, and
Right.
I don't know how to gracefully and tactfully cut them off.
Yeah.
And I almost think they need a longer appointment because they have so much to say. And it's not about their teeth either.
No, I know.
You're not getting mad.
Yeah. There's a couple of things. So, okay, this goes into a little bit deeper than what we normally do in this class, but I think it's okay to go there. We have time. So there are basically 3 ways that we gather information from the world. It's through our visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Yes? When we're born, we start out kinesthetically. It's everything is physical. And it's interesting. So when a baby's first born, it's all about feeling the body. Within 2 weeks, or within the first week, I think it's a week or two, the auditory starts to become more refined. So that's the next one that is developed. And finally, the eyes. Within a month, their vision is completely, they're not going cross-eyed anymore, and they can actually see you instead of just a blur. And then the cycle starts again, so that when a child is going from 0 to 5 years old, it's still very kinesthetic. Everything goes in their mouths. Everything learning is about touching and understanding their world physically and the sensation that it has in their body. By the time they start kindergarten, do you remember what we did in kindergarten with kids? What was the most common tool? Singing. Yes, singing. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Why? Because our auditory is the next thing that again starts to really get developed. And then finally, it's our eyes and our vision. Now, when we have those gifted kids that we tag in kindergarten, why are they gifted? Oh, because they're visual long before the others. But eventually they'll all catch up. Now, some have a much higher IQ, of course. So there's always that to play with. But we tend to look at the people who are visual as smarter. And why? Because if you think about it, pictures speak faster than words. And words speak faster than movement. So the faster we are, the smarter we are in this whole world, right? So that's what it's all about. So if you're smart, it's because you're visual. If you are auditory, you're still smart, but it takes you a little bit longer. You got to hear it a few more times. It has to be repeated a few more times. But if you're kinesthetic, poor you. I mean, really, you have to feel it. I would venture to say most of you are kinesthetic first. Why? Why would I say that? Why would I say that most of you are kinesthetic? Of course, right. Your job is kinesthetic. It's all about touchy-feely, right? So you are the students who are most misunderstood in school. Would you agree to that? Yes, absolutely. Now that does not mean that you don't have auditory and visual skills too, but kinesthetic is your most comfortable. We all have that which we prefer. Now as we continue down this continuum and we get older, what's the first thing to start to go away? Visual, right. First, it's our vision. I mean, at 40, I was wearing reading glasses, and yes, now I need them all the time. So first it's our vision, and then it's our auditory, and the final is touch, is the kinesthetic. So by the time you end up with your senior in your chair, more than likely she is at using more of the auditory and kinesthetic than the visual preference, okay? So that being said, there's two ways to stop an auditory and a kinesthetic. For the auditory, it's to jump in at the breath. You know what I mean by that? So when you're talking, you're breathing out. When you're not talking, it's when you're taking in a breath. Right?
People talk with their mouth full, you'd be surprised.
But you can't, sound cannot, no, I know. But sound cannot come out without breath. It cannot physically come out without breath. It takes breath to get the word out. So while they're talking, you can't get a word in edgewise. But the minute they stop and take a breath in, and that's what you're listening for, that's when you stop. That's when you step in. Okay? I did this yesterday with a client, because this one loves to tell the stories, and it's the same stories, so I've heard them already 3 times. And I have to, now I'm really matching. And then as soon as she takes a breath, oh, and so, you know this, and that's when I step in, okay? So that's what you do with them. And you know what? The amazing thing about it is they don't even feel it. It does not feel insulting. It does not feel like you've cut them off. It's like it just goes in that flow. That's the auditory, because auditory has a rhythm. And if you stay with the same rhythm, then you're matching it. It feels even better. So you would then you would interrupt, and you would take the lead. And they will shut up as long as you keep the lead. Yeah, just don't breathe. Now, if they're kinesthetic, you can do the same thing with a touch.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How are we going to know if they're kinesthetic?
You try them both. Try them both. I mean, you can't. I've done both at the same time. So I'll wait for the breath, and then I'll go, oh, and.
Oh, okay.
You see, and the minute I do that, I'm like pulling them back into their body and focusing them right here and now. So that's how you would do it with the, yeah. Helpful?
Yes.
Okay, I know that was a little aside, but it was probably
No,
important.
it's good
Okay.
to know, because I think we all have that, whether it's old, young.
Yeah. Yes.
What I was imagining, so you get that breath and you say, so how are your teeth and gums today? Let's put you back in the chair and take a look.
Right. Right.
And then at the end of the appointment, it's a little bit tougher, but I'm thinking you would say, when they take the breath, and maybe touch them to get their attention. So, I'll see you in 3 months. Does that sound good to you?
Right. Right. Exactly that. Exactly that. I mean, okay, so I was working with a woman yesterday, and I'm trying to help her to do her plan. And every question leads her to a story. And like I said, there are stories, I've already been down this road. And so I don't, do you ever tell them, oh, you already told me that? No. Thank you. Okay, good. I'm just checking. So you listen, you don't interrupt, like, oh, you react the way they expect you to. And then the minute she took a breath, I went, and so back to this. And so, let's, and so. And so is like, it's a connector. Thank you. Thank you. I want you as my assistant. Yes. Okay. So that's the way to do it. Yes. Any other questions about that? Yes?
It's not really a question, but I sometimes tell my kids the same story. I forget that I told them, and my mom does that to me too. So we've got this code
Signal.
We say, and they go, Mom's a chocolate croissant. Because our friends went to Europe, and all they could talk about was the chocolate croissants, but we've heard that's a chocolate croissant. Chocolate croissant, Mom.
Oh, that's great. And you know, my mom's 78 years old, and she came to visit this summer, and she was like having a little trouble remembering things, and she was so aware she was not remembering things that she was getting very frustrated with herself and a little scared. And I said, Mom, you know, I'm 54 years old, and I too forget things. There are just things that just are not that important, and what you're trying to remember right now is just not that important. But the more you try to remember and beat yourself up for forgetting, and start telling yourself that the reason that you're doing this is because you're older, the more real that becomes.
Well, it
Right.
also stresses and then stresses. They
Right.
did this on TV last night. They were talking
Oh, really?
about the debates and
Ah,
what's his name
yeah.
forgot, and didn't say something. So they-
What's his name?
They were doing the diagram of a brain and why we can't
Right.
sometimes make it come forward.
Right.
And one of the things was stress.
Oh,
Those
stress is
receptors, it's
huge.
like you just
Absolutely.
wipe out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes it worse.
And one of the things that if you're trying to get them to, you know, they start in a story and it's really long and you know this, is, oh, was that the time that you did such and such? And it reminds them that you've already heard it without saying, oh, you told me that.
Right.
You
Right.
just, you make you know what's coming, if you can remember it, just start talking about it, and then they realize, and then they'll, yeah, oh, did I tell you?
Right.
Yes, and that was such a wonderful trip you had.
Yeah. Very good. That's very good. Good.
But it definitely can cut down the time.
And again, they don't tell stories for the same reasons that we tell stories. So, and we'll get into that later, so that we can get in more depth. So, getting back to what you just experienced and discovered was that your body language, your voice, your gestures, your positioning in your stance play a big part in communicating something non-verbally to the person that you're with that is apart from your words. So when I teach this, one of the things that I really, really, really strongly impart on you is that this is very, very, very powerful. When you start to use this consciously, you become a master manipulator. Now, most of us think of a manipulator as a bad person. Okay? Manipulation is not bad. All it simply means is you're changing something from this to this. But if your integrity is not involved in what you're doing, then you will cause harm. Because you can convince people of things that they don't want. How many times have you met somebody and they have asked you to do something that you really kind of didn't know, either weren't sure you wanted to do or knew you didn't want to do, but you found yourself saying yes? Yes? Anybody ever heard of buyer's remorse? You know what that is? It's that feeling of being manipulated. It is the feeling you get 2 to 3 days after you've made that decision, because now you are not under the influence of the person who had built such great affinity and rapport with you that you felt so understood and so loved and so cared for that you would do anything for them. That's how powerful this is. I once was playing with this. I was sitting in the back of a church, and on the stage was the choir. And at that point, they weren't singing, they were just sitting. And I thought, I'm going to try this. I picked out a person, and I'm talking a big church. They were easily 100 feet in front of me. I picked out one person on the stage, and I started breathing with them. That's all I did. Just watched his shoulders going up and down and breathing with him. And it took less than a minute for him to zero in and make eye contact with me in the back row of this church. That's how powerful. So when all else fails, breathing with your client is really, really powerful stuff. And because your clients have their mouth open, and most of the time you're working on them, they can't talk. If you, as you're working with them, can just get into the cadence of breathing with them, you will be keeping that rapport throughout the whole thing.
Well, that helps them calm down.
Yes, it will.
And stop holding their breath.
Yes. Yes. Now here's the thing about rapport, and this is where the magic comes in. The first thing you do is you match. Okay? Think back to the very first exercise you did where you found yourselves matching. So when you are trying to send that nonverbal message that I care about you, I respect you, I like you, you're safe here, your first thing is to match. So you're going to match by bringing your seat down so that we are eye level. You're going to match your voice. You're going to match your gestures. You're going to match your facial expressions. Everything is just going to match. And you're going to match them, and then we're going to do what we call pacing. And I think I have a slide for this. Yeah. Okay, so then you pace them. What that means is you're going to kind of follow their lead. It's just like a dance. Okay, so if they become a little louder, you become a little louder. If they become a little quieter, you become a little quieter. If they move, which in the chair they wouldn't move, but you know, if you were doing it with anybody else, they move a little, you move with them. Now you have to be careful. You don't want to be mimicking them. So if they go, you don't want to be like that would be silly. But if they go like this, you might go like this. Okay, it's similar enough that it will still feel like you're in rapport, but it won't feel like you're aping them. Okay, so you pace, 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 and then you lead. And what I mean by that is you change, and that's your tester to see if you're in rapport. Because if you change your voice or you change your position, and they follow, just like in a dance, then you have successfully built rapport. If at any point you might have rapport then for a while, and then all of a sudden you'll know when rapport is broken because all of a sudden there's a disconnect. When they do that, you just go back to matching, pacing, and then leading. Does anybody have any? Yes.
I've actually done that with patients who will not accept treatment. Or patients that I feel that there's a wall, it's like, I can't stand this person's driving me crazy. I try and figure out why, and normally it's a personality or an attitude. And if I try and mimic that to just a subtle degree, normally by the end of the appointment, or maybe not the end of the appointment, but maybe by the end of the appointment they like me a little bit better, and they're a little more apt to say, oh, all right, I'll come in every 4 months.
Right.
Or, well, I'll think about that crowd.
Yeah.
But I was totally amazed when
Very
I did that
good.
and it worked.
Yeah, it absolutely does work. It absolutely does. Now, there is, and I will always put this little caveat in there is 7% of the human population that are hard to make this work with because they are what we call the I. They're totally internal. They're so internal, they don't get any external clues. And I'm sure you have all met at least one person like that. It's the person who just grabs you on the street and wants to tell you everything that's going on in their life, and you're giving them every clue. You're looking at your watch. You're like, you're going like this. You're even saying, I have an appointment, and they're just like still talking and chasing you down. Everybody have somebody like that in their life? Yeah. Those are the people that are, and it's not that they're bad. It's not that there's something wrong with them. It's just that they are so internally focused that they do not get the clues from the outside world. And you literally have to cut those people off. You have to actually do something that for you feels like you are the rudest person in the world. But for them, again, because they're so internally focused, they don't even notice. It doesn't bother them at all.
Is Asperger's a component of that, or is it separate?
I couldn't even answer that. I would say no. It's not. Okay. It's not the same thing. It's a meta program that goes on internally. We all have the I, we, me, they perspective, so we have the ability to shift from one position to the next like a dance. First I'm looking from my perspective, I know what I think, I know what I feel, and then I put myself in your shoes and I know how you feel if I were you, and then I put myself in the observer and I'm watching both and I get it all. But there are some people who just never step out of their position, they just never do. And it's not, I don't think that Asperger's or any kind of autism at all is a reason for that. Yeah, but it's a good question. So, how do you feel about what you've learned so far? Yeah? Okay. Let's check time.
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock. We started at what time? 9? Oh, wait. Okay, good. All right. We're doing pretty good. Okay. So a couple of things that I didn't put in here that this is really good stuff too. When someone is angry, I think about those times like, especially with your kids or your husband, or with a client. They're angry and they're frustrated. What do we tend to do? What do you tend to do?
Shut off.
Shut off.
You don't want to irritate them, so you don't talk.
Okay, yeah. That's sometimes what we do, especially if it's someone who's related to us, like a husband. Or a wife, I should say, just in case, But what if it was somebody that's just somebody who walked into the office and they're yelling, I hate you people, this bill is horrible, and they're screaming. What do we tend to do with those people?
I go in another room and let the receptionist.
All right, I'll just tell you the answer because I know you know it. But don't we talk a little slower? We're trying to calm them down. Like, it's okay. Calm down. And what happens?
You get mad.
Why?
Don't say, oh.
Because you're condescending.
Because you're not in rapport. You're absolutely out of rapport.
You're right, this bill sucks.
Exactly, right. Try this with your kids. If you have kids, try this. I remember the very first time I played with this with my son. He was 8 years old, and he was so mad, and he was stomping, and he was getting ready to go up the stairs. I hate you. He's yelling at me, and I'm never gonna love you again. And I was like, I know you're so angry right now. I can tell you're just so mad. And he's like, yeah, I am. And I'm like, I know. Yeah, I don't like you anymore. I know you don't like me anymore. And all of a sudden, he wasn't angry anymore. Magic. I was in rapport. I was matching his intensity. I was matching his body language. The words didn't have to match. Because that's only 7%. 93% of my communication was telling him, I love you even though you hate me right now. I get it that you're upset. So that is what he was getting on a nonverbal subliminal message, which allowed him to let go of all the histrionics, and then we got down to the words, So when you have the opportunity to play with that, I invite you to. It is amazing how powerful it is. Now, you do not, just hold on a second. So if somebody's really angry, you don't want to get right in their face. Okay, that will not work because that's too much intensity. You want to be like right there. But if you're way down here, calm down. I know you're upset. You're just gonna, what you're doing is invalidating them. You are making them feel like they're crazy. They're so misunderstood. They're so disliked. They're so disrespected. So you want to be right here and match them as much as possible, and then check to see after you've been pacing them for a while. You start to lead. You start to calm down. And if they follow, you have rapport. And now you're going to be able to get them into a place where you can have a real communication.
I was working in an office last year, and they were going through a whole bunch of changes. And the patients had just, they'd come in, and almost everyone said, I just filled out my medical history last year, and they're making me do it again. And I'm going, I said, I'm kind of new here too. And I would just say, yeah, they're redoing the paperwork. I can't even remember what I said, but you just kind of had to acknowledge them. Yeah, it is frustrating to do this again. I know you just did it last year.
Right.
But they're redoing the books, and I can't remember. It was frustrating for them.
Of course.
Of course. So I'm at this place, and I'm like, everybody's all mad because they're doing, I'm going,
right.
And so I'm going, okay,
Yeah. And I would venture to say that you were probably very successful in, because even as you were describing it, you were matching what you said they were saying. Not just in the words, but in your tonality, in your own, it's frustrating. Like, if somebody talks really staccato, then you need to be talking staccato. If they're talking really melodic, then you should be talking melodic, right? So, and when they're angry, that's what it is. They're talking faster, there's less breath. They're talking from up here. Usually their voice is louder, or it could be really, it could be, I guess, it could be, it's definitely louder, but I don't know if it's deeper or higher, depending on that person's tonality. But it's clipped, right? It's not as gentle. It's not as sweet. So you don't want to be gentle and sweet. Yes.
What about patients that can't talk
Mm-hmm.
and they can hear you and understand you, but they can't talk to you only with their eyes and are they feeling demeaned or I don't know.
No. Why would they? If your words, even if you never used an, okay, here's an example. This is a wonderful example. I was providing care to a woman who had Alzheimer's and lived in a locked memory care facility, whose husband did not have dementia but refused to live without her. So he moved into this facility. It didn't take very long before it actually killed him to live there. So he ended up in the hospital. The family called me. They were there at the hospital, and they said, please just sit with my mom. So I went and I sat with her, and we were in the common room. And right across from me, about that far away, was a woman sitting in a wheelchair, just staring off into space. And so I'm just sitting there with this woman talking, and all of a sudden, this woman in front of me starts to tap her leg, like this. And I look at her, and I'm thinking, she must want me. Well, I don't know why, but I just feel she wants me. So I go up to her, and I get down on my knees, and I put my hand on her arm, and I say hello, and I realize she's not talking. She's nonverbal. So I stop talking, and I start breathing with her. And while I'm breathing with her, in my head, I'm saying, oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, look at your eyes. Wow, you're special. You know, I wish I would have known you a long time ago. I'm saying these things in here, and I'm breathing with her. And I'm looking her in the eye, and she's staring me in the eye. And then after about, 5 minutes, my legs couldn't take any more, and I needed to go. And so I said out loud, I said, I would like to come back and see you again. And she looked at me and she said, that would make all the difference. And I thought, oh, how sweet. And I got up, and behind me, I hear this gasp. And I turn, and it's the caregivers who work at the facility. And I go to them and said, what's the matter? They said, that woman has not talked in 2 years. Oh, wow. Okay? So that was, to me, one of the most profound messages of how we can communicate on so many different levels, that it doesn't require words. I have been with hospice patients who are on their deathbed and just breathed with them and felt that communication going back and forth. So it's not about the words, not about what you say. And you can be talking with them, and if you are in rapport with everything else, you'll know because they'll be following you. They'll do what you're asking them to do, right?
Am I looking them in the eye all the time that you're breathing with
Mm-hmm.
them?
Well, and I did with that woman, but with my hospice patients, no, because their eyes are closed. Their eyes are closed. And yet I would be sitting there on the side bed just breathing and not saying anything, and I'd get up to leave, and they could feel it, and they'd open their eyes, and I'd be like, okay, I'm here. They'd be letting me know.
You've probably experienced this too, but my dad passed away from Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. My mom took care of him till the last year, 18 months. Mm-hmm. So he was in a home, but anyway, it was a wonderful place. And when he was in his last days, they had a harp player come in, and this guy will feel the patient's pulse, and they play the music with. It's kind of like the breathing.
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
So beautiful.
It is beautiful. Yeah, and I've a lot of. I'm going to be working on something like that down the road because there is the sound is one of those things that goes with them as they transition, and as well as touch. And, you know, seniors don't get touched. I mean, you think about how much touching we do every day, especially in your business. You touch all day long. But I mean, you know, we shake people's hands, we tap them on the back, we hug, we kiss. And the older we get, the less contact we have with people. So we have less physical contact. So touch for seniors is huge. And so when they come to you, I mean, and you're touching them, it's got to feel really good, really, really good to them, you know, and something that feeds them to the point where they don't want to leave because they're feeling so nurtured. I keep hitting this thing. Yeah.
I have a question. I can see where you're coming from as far as matching, but I'm sure almost everybody's had patients that they know. I don't know if they're angry, if they are just super control people, but you know that the minute they come in, that it's almost confrontational. And that's what my training would be, that they are anxious, but especially if the guy's 6'2" and weighs 300, and, you know, I mean, he's not gonna relinquish that, what I guess he considers as control very easily. Do you feel that this is gonna be enough to
Yeah, I do.
to get him mellowed?
Yes, because well, first of all, you have to know what your intention is. What is it that you are trying or hoping to do through your communication with him? Are you trying to take his control?
Well, there are times when I would really like to.
Sometimes
To
you
be
want
very
to change
honest.
behavior.
But
You might
I
want
just
to
want
change.
him to get through the appointment without all this anxiety.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you know, without knowing what exactly he's feeling, because we're making some presupposition. This is my next thing. Is like, we often hallucinate or mind read when we are not in rapport. We are getting conflicting messages with no feedback. That's the next place I was going to. Okay, so that's what happens when we are faced with someone who is so different from us, so very different from us, and we don't naturally and normally know how to build rapport with them. We don't do what we did in that very first exercise, right? Because we're not comfortable ourselves. So you didn't, in that first exercise, you guys did not consciously sit there going, okay, I'm going to be talking and she's going to be listening, and I want to match her so that we're in rapport, and I'm going to match and I'm going to listen and I'm going to use all these skills. You didn't do that, right? Did any of you do that? No, because you didn't even know that that's what you were doing. It's something you were doing unconsciously. But now if I said, okay, B's talk, A's listen, you'd be like, all right, so now I'm going to make sure my gestures and my body language and everything matches, because now I understand what rapport is. So there's a lot of times when we mind read or hallucinate about what we think the other person is thinking, based on the feedback that we're getting from them. We do them a great disservice, as well as ourselves, if we act upon that information that we are mind reading, because it may or may not be true. So for me, and what I've taught others, is to ask yourself internally the question, is there more than one reason for him or her to be saying or doing that? If the answer is yeah, there could be, then you know you're mind reading. Right? So your first thing I think you said was, you know, he's kind of intimidating and he wants control, right? So that could be a mind read. He wants control. But then later you say, well, he's anxious. Oh, that's a different possibility, right? So just the fact that if you said to yourself, okay, so what would make this person act the way he does? Well, he could be really nervous, but he's a big guy and he's afraid, and he doesn't want anybody to know he's afraid. Or he's a total control freak and just doesn't like being vulnerable and laying back in a way that he's got his mouth open and somebody's got his fingers in there. You know, or he's just had a really bad experience and he's you know, whatever, he wants to sue everybody, who knows. But the fact that there could be many reasons for the way he is displaying his behavior tells us that before we react to it, we need to check. And so a lot of times, and you have to build rapport first, so first you match, you pace. You know, if you are with an auditory person, You're going to match and pace because with their words, because they're going to be really good about telling you everything. And usually it's hard to shut them up. And when they start a story, they start at the beginning and there's an end. It's like a tape recorder going on inside their head. And if you stop them in the middle, they have to start at the beginning again. Have you ever noticed that? They can't start where they left off. That just doesn't work that way. Where a visual person, and I would venture to say this guy's probably visual. Doesn't talk. It's pictures. It's pictures in their minds, and they're very they hold themselves differently too, because they actually kind of look at you like this a lot of times too, because they're creating pictures. It's not because they're looking down at you, it's because they're creating pictures, and this is where the pictures are. Where an auditory person like me, notice how my head is always like this? Why? Because I'm listening, man. Okay? And a kinesthetic person would be, touching themselves a lot. So I'm a little bit that too. But those are your clues. So you need to just match him. If you match him, you will get to a place where, because now you are subliminally and non-verbally saying, you're okay. You're okay. I like you. I like you. I care about you. I respect you. I understand you. And as you do that, you will then have permission to say, I'm wondering if coming to the dentist is something, some people just really get nervous about being at the dentist. Some people just hate the time it takes to have to sit in the chair and do nothing. I bet that's partly his problem. And I'm wondering if any of that is true for you. And the fact that you've already built rapport, he will answer. He will answer. He's got.
Seems like building rapport with a visual person is the most difficult one to me.
No, not really. Not really. I mean, it requires flexibility in you, but it's not impossible. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of stilling yourself. Like if you are a kinesthetic person and you tend to talk with your hands, or an auditory person who just, because the story is way too long, to cut yourself, to learn to speak in sound bites, and to learn to not move. Visual people they are very distracted by people who move a lot. They really don't like it because it's too many pictures. It can really make them kind of crazy. So when you're talking to a visual person, you need to sit fairly still and be talking to them like this. So if I was doing a presentation, I'm watching you guys right now. I'm boring the hell out of you. Right? Aren't you? Are you like, move, Allie, God bless, move, right? I can feel it. I feel it. I'm so out of rapport with you. But whereas when I'm talking and I'm moving like this, man, the energy in the room is completely different. But if I had a bunch of engineers here, I would probably be like this. I would be much more visual. I would be referring to this thing a lot more. I would have a lot more pictures going up in here a lot faster. It's very different. That's a whole other class. You're welcome. I hope I answered your question. So when you feel like there may be more than one response to a internal question that you have about somebody else's behavior or words to you, check. And it's simply asking, It goes back to the meaning of your communication is the response it elicits. So if you get a response that wasn't what you expected, or you see a behavior that you don't expect in this particular circumstance, then just ask and check. But be in rapport. And when you're working with the elderly especially, I think we talked about this, speed is very important as well as tone. And your body positioning, imperative. That you not only get even, but even a little below at the beginning so that you can give them some power. And I would say with what you do, this is really transferable to any age because understanding some particular communication tips for seniors, and then also going into working with people with dementia and Alzheimer's, okay? So I'm not sure how many of you know Erik Erikson, but Erik Erikson is a very famous psychologist who came out in the, I want to say, 70s when, and he had created all these stages of development that were very, very useful, especially with children. My mother was an early childhood educator, and she taught me all of them. I don't remember all the young stuff, but I do know this stuff. And so for later adulthood, the ages of 55 or 65, somewhere in there to death, he says the ego development stage or criteria is integrity versus despair. And the basic strength is wisdom, which makes sense. So what he means by that is that developmentally, we go through stages throughout our whole life where we are constantly going through this opposite, like when we're younger, there's stages like guilt versus initiative, you know. So do we take initiative and step out of our parents' control and then, oh, we feel guilty for doing that. So this is, the integrity piece he's talking about is, it's a time in our lives when we actually are looking back and we are deciding whether or not we were successful, whether or not we were successful in love, in work, in friendships, in parenthood, and we're finding meaning in our lives. That's the time of integrity. There's also the side of despair, that if we do look back and we deem ourselves inadequate, we say we were a failure in things, then we could go to that place of despair. And we may fluctuate in that, in different categories of our lives. I call that, and many others do too, the stage of legacy, because integrity is used so much across the board nowadays that I think legacy really says it more succinctly, right? It's about looking at the meaning in our lives. And what I have found is that when a senior maintains control, they are able to go through this developmental stage. And if they hit a place of despair, which will show up in depression, we can help them recategorize. We can help them through talk, therapy, to go back and reframe what they have seen as despairing and change it so that they can find the integrity and legacy in it. But if they are fighting for control, if they are fighting for their basic need of control, they don't even get to that. They don't get to that developmental stage. And then you'll see anger and frustration and desperation and resistance and all these negative things you will see because they haven't been able to get to that. So our job is to at least recognize that that's the place that they're coming from when they're in those senior years. I find this chart fascinating. It breaks up the different generations. So what the seniors we're talking about today are the traditionals. They're the people that were born between 1925 and 1945. And they've been characterized as people who are practical. Now remember, most of them were either born and raised during the Depression, so that makes sense that they're very practical, probably frugal too. They're patient and hardworking. They grew up in a time period when your success was measured by the actual effort you put. So if you went out there and you worked that field, you had a better crop. You know, if you went into that factory and you worked those days, you got that watch at the end of 30 years. That was the way that life was back then. They were extremely respectful of authority because anyone who had authority had education. Not everybody had an education in those days. Not a whole call to college. So if you were a doctor, oh my gosh, you were an authority on something. If you were a police officer, you went through certain training. If you were a teacher, well, maybe teachers weren't quite as esteemed at that point. And they're rule followers. They grew up in the war times, you know, where rules were really important. So when you think about your seniors and you're working with them, you got to keep that mentality in place, which is really hard when you look at who we are. Those of us who are boomers, we are optimistic. Everything's going to be great, don't worry about it.
You can look at me because I'm 45.
Me too. Teamwork, it's all about teamwork. It's not about hard work, it's about doing it together. It's, you know, if we do it together, it should work. If we don't do it together, then not necessarily. We are ambitious. We're always looking for the next thing to do. And we are workaholics, right? So we come from a very different place. I look at this as my mother, myself, my daughter's Generation X, and then we don't have any baby. Well, actually, no, my daughter is Generation Y. But my mother, the other thing that's not on here about seniors in that age group, they also value quality, not quantity. So that is really important because when I was providing home care, it was not about how many hours it was going to take somebody to come in, and they didn't care about that. They cared about the quality of the person who walked in the door and the quality of the work and they didn't mind paying the money if they were going to get the quality they believed had to be there, right? So it's not so much that they're going to pay $2,000 for the crown, but that crown damn well better fit right, it better feel right, it better have the right color, right? Am I making, yes? Okay. And then you have Generation X, and that's a younger generation. They're more skeptical. They're self-reliant. They're the kids that are the latchkey kids. Kind of grew up there in their, mid-30s now. They risk takers, yeah, and they're the first to actually consider this work-life balance. And then, of course, the younger generation, those now, they're hopeful. They want meaningful work. They're not going to just take a job. And they don't really care about the money. They really don't care about the money. They want to, join the Peace Corps. And my generation wanted to do that, but for different reasons than this one does. They like diversity, and they are totally technologically savvy. I give my 10-year-old nephew my cell phone. He can figure everything out in 5 minutes. I've had it for 6 months. I still don't know what it does. So these are just some characteristics that I think are pretty useful when you're working with the senior, because if you approach them from a practical perspective, you're going to get somewhere. If you want to come from a place of authority, you very easily can. Whereas with the boomer, I don't think so. We have our own authority.
Yeah.
You're going to really have to prove to me that you are smarter than I am for me to really listen to you, Not so with them. In fact, when I had my home care company, I had to be really careful to teach my caregivers how easily these people will give their authority away. And so that when they went in there, they were aware of that and not take it. Because it's so easy to take it because they want to give it to you. You're my nurse. No, I'm not your nurse. I'm not your nurse. I'm not your doctor. I'm just your caregiver, and it's your decision. Oh, no, what. So it's very important to know that piece. Any questions about that? Okay, moving along. The unique communication habits of seniors. Lack of urgency. Why can't they make a decision? Anybody ever hear themselves saying that? We get really frustrated with the fact that they can't make a decision because we are living in a world where everything is quick and fast and we are overstimulated and we do not have time to wait for that next thing. We want the Reader's Digest version of everything, right? But a senior needs that time because making that decision, they use that time to reflect. They're looking back over all the decisions they made. And for them, there is no hurry, right? There's no hurry because they know that most of the decisions we've made in life, things work out for the best anyway. There's this kind of, what's that? It's a French word.
C'est la vie.
Yeah, laissez-faire, c'est la vie, something like that. That kind of more of an acceptance of, well, look at all those times I fretted, and it didn't matter, So they kind of have that attitude. Non-linear conversation. So why can't they stick to the subject? I want to talk about this, and let's get it. We need to make a decision. Let's talk about this. And they're off on this tangent and that tangent. Again, because it is in each of those tangents, there's a value. There's a value they're reaching for to try to express. And so it is important for us to allow them and try to track it because there's jewels in those little off sentences and off little stories that have something to do with what they're aligning with their legacy and their meaning in their life.
Ellie?
Mm-hmm.
But don't you think that then these other generations, like the boomers and such, when they get to be in that age group, aren't they going to kind of align those values We're gonna be just like them.
No. Our values are not going to be.
But I mean, we're gonna
do the same
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
Yes, we
yeah.
are definitely going to do the same things because.
I'm turning into my mother.
Oh, I know. Tell me about it. Oh, I know. Oh my God. Even though I dyed my hair.
So scary.
Isn't it the funniest thing is when I see my kids, now they're all grown up and I hug them. Even as I hug them, I'm like, oh, this feels like my mother. This is the way my mother does it to me, It's so weird. Love it, but I love her. So yes, we will do this. But as we do that, our value system is going to be different. But we're still looking for the same thing. We're still looking for the meaning of our lives. And even now, I think because of the economy and how many boomers are having to reinvent themselves, so not so much you guys, you have your jobs, but there's a lot of people in my age group who are actually kind of doing their life review. They don't recognize they are, but they are, and I think it actually kind of puts them a little bit in depression because it's too soon to be doing that, So that's just kind of my thought, but I don't know how real it is. Repetition, why do they always tell the same story? Same thing, there's a jewel in that story. So you're going to hear me say pretty much the same thing for all of these things, the reasons. We know why we get frustrated with it. We just don't have the time for it. We think that there's something wrong with them. When we hear them repeating the same story, we think, oh, there she goes. It's her mind. She's losing it. She's got Alzheimer's. She's got dementia. No, not true. Not necessarily. Okay? It is because there's a something in that story that she is struggling with, that she hasn't figured out yet and gotten her jewel out of, or his jewel out of. And that's why they keep telling that same story. There's something there that they're looking for.
Or would that just be a way for them to affirm that they have had that jewel and that's something they hang on to?
Yeah, it could be, but it's more likely that they haven't figured it. They're still, it's like a scratch that you kind of itch over and over until you get it, and then you go, yeah. I don't know. That's at least what research has shown, that it's really more about not having it yet. They're still struggling with it. I mean, it depends on the story too. Like the grandma who tells the story about her grandchildren over and over. That's something different. That's something that she's really proud of. But if it's a story that has a problem in it, it's typically that. And then the final one, attention to details. Why do they fret about the unimportant stuff? You're trying to get mom up, dressed, and ready to go to the doctor, and she's like, wait a minute, there's that thing right here I gotta pick this, right? And you're like, just leave it, mom, just leave it. No, she can't, because even these delays, these are all about her ability to continuously look for the meaning. And even that, fretting about the unimportant things, what we think are unimportant, there's something in it for her. So it's important for you as boomers and younger to understand that when you see these things and you experience these things, they aren't something that's wrong, right? That's the whole point of this. It's not wrong. It's not senility. It's not something that you should judge as, oh gosh, I better go to the doctor. It really is very common communication styles and habits that seniors have that help them through that life review. And the best thing that you can do is be a good listener, be a good historian for them. And ask them the deeper questions as they're going through, telling that same story. So what is it about that story, Mom? There must be something in it that really is important to you. Wow, now you're helping her get to that place.
What about the attention to details? Because my husband turned 70 in February, and this last year, he seems to have more attention
to the details. Yeah.
What do you do with it? What is it doing?
Well, here, let me, if I didn't make it clear. No, that's okay. It helps him to determine what's most important. Okay. So, and it by putting his attention on it, he is actually looking at it from like this perspective and then this perspective, and so you can just simply say, well, that there must be something really important in that piece for you, and acknowledge it so that he doesn't fret about why he's doing it. Because he might, if we respond to any of these things from a place of judgment of like, I don't think you're okay, why do you care about that? Then they go there.
I've been happy because
Yeah.
at the moment is making sure that the kitchen is nice and clean.
Nice.
So it's not all negative.
Right, and so, maybe the value in that is that, he is finding that it could be that he likes the movement. He's finding he's putting value in his ability to be a participant in the family. Or it could be that he really values neatness. Or it could be that he really values moving his body and keeping himself busy. So you don't know which one it is, but it's something in that.
The underneath the handles on the faucet have never been cleaned.
Wow, I like to come to my house, man. Have him come to my house.
Years ago.
It's part of that though, because they were hardworking and now they don't have the energy. I mean, if they're retired, they're looking for things to do because that's what their values were. To do.
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. Mm-mm. No, this is really a mental excavation of their life. It would be similar to, have any of you ever done any journaling? Do anybody do journaling? Okay. Well, those who do understand what I'm going to say, but when if I've done journaling for all my life, and every now and then I'll pull them out because I'll be like writing on Totei's thing and thinking, I've just come across such great insights and I've grown today, right? And then I'll go and pick up the book that was like from 5 years ago. Oh, I said that then too, about the very same thing, So it's like that kind of thing, that they're actually just like kind of looking at when you get to a certain age where you know that going ahead in your life, there's only one direction. And that direction is immortality. You know that it's just a matter of time that you are going to start having some losses, not only general losses in your life like friends and family, but you're going to have physical losses and you're going to have some mental losses. And so you know that's coming. It is hard to even imagine what that would feel like to be cognitively aware of that, right? So they don't go forward. They're very much present time. Most seniors are very much present time. And most of them are at a place in their life where they accept all the screwy things that go on around them, because they recognize from here how many years they were upset about those screwy things, and yet here they are, and things are okay, So it's that evaluation that they are making when they're going through this. And they process out loud. When they don't even realize they're processing out loud. And that's why it's important for you to know this, because you can help them do that process, which is going to get them to their legacy that much sooner. And that is a joyous experience for them. Because once they have it, then they share it. And that's what the meaning of their life is in those last few years, is being able to share that wisdom. That's how they get to that wisdom. So it's not about being bored. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, that's not a component of where they may be feeling, but that's not going to drive this particular habit of communication.
Allie, in your book, do you talk more about this?
No, I don't. No, that would be another book. I'll get right on it. But what if they can't remember? Oh. By age 85, 50% of the population will have some form of dementia. Dementia is a general decline of the mental abilities that are severe enough to interfere with your daily living activities. It affects your memory, your problem-solving skills, and your ability to learn something new. Now, Alzheimer's has become a pretty common term for dementia, and most people relate Alzheimer's and dementia as the same thing. There's actually over 1,000 different forms of dementia. So what's different about Alzheimer's and all these other forms of dementia is that Alzheimer's is a disease that will actually be fatal because it will ultimately destroys the brain and shuts the parts of the brain that control the body. So it will eventually be fatal. And there's no coming back from it, where there are some forms of dementia where they might be demented one day and be perfectly fine the next. Something they forgot today, they'll remember tomorrow. But with Alzheimer's, once it's gone, it's gone. The most common causes of dementia. I share this with you guys because the likelihood, whether you work with people with dementia or not, the likelihood that you will know somebody with dementia at a ratio of 50% of the population over 85 is pretty high. And it is important for you to know that dementia is caused by all of these things. It could be prescription drugs. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen a senior go into the hospital for minor surgery and end up with hospital psychosis. Very, very common, because they are on a myriad of drugs that they are not used to that affect them differently today than it did 10 years ago or affects us. And unless they are in a ward, like say orthopedics, this is a fascinating thing to me. My daughter's a nurse in an orthopedic wing, so she knows all about hospital psychosis. And I'm like, well, why do you know about it, but this department here doesn't? She says, because in orthopedics, we deal with a lot of hip, a lot of knees, a lot of senior clientele. So we know how common that is. Versus a friend of mine whose father went in to have a gallbladder surgery. And he's on the East Coast, and she gets the call saying, he's got Alzheimer's, he needs to be put in a facility. I'm like, what? You don't get Alzheimer's overnight. No, he's got hospital psychosis, but the hospital staff did not recognize that. So important for you guys to know that stuff. The combined effect of weight loss or gain and medications. You know, when they lose a lot of weight, those medications work differently on them. Dehydration. My gosh, it's one of the most common causes. That and urinary tract infections are one of the most common causes of dementia and confusion. A fall or concussion, real common. Depression, a vitamin B deficiency, alcohol use, all of these things can cause dementia and Alzheimer's. Hold on just a moment, so one thing. And so the important thing that I want to stress this because I see this happen way too often. If you know someone or you have a loved one who is showing signs of confusion, memory loss, imbalance, anything like that, and you take them to the doctor, and that doctor says, oh, it's dementia or it's Alzheimer's, period, take them to another doctor. Because before they say that, they should be doing blood tests. Because any one of these things is more common to have one of these things causing that than the fact that it is dementia or Alzheimer's. Okay?
I'm not sure that everyone, I just happen to have a mother-in-law who's in a retirement home that is 93, who they keep checking for the urinary tract. So I found out what it was, is that it's one that elderly people get that makes them have dementia. And
right.
And as soon as it's gone, it's gone.
Yep.
And it's one that if they don't go to the bathroom completely often enough, they will get it. It's a very strange, because they kept checking her for it, and I go, what? And so I got an explanation of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how many times that has happened. And just so you know, Alzheimer's and dementia does not happen overnight. It does not happen like that. So if you have somebody who one day is perfectly fine and the next day is confused and can't remember things and is struggling, then one of these things has happened, And it's your job to be the investigator and figure it out. Okay?
Ellie?
Mm-hmm.
The prescription drugs and the hospital psychosis,
Mm-hmm.
is that usually temporary as well?
Yes.
It is.
It is. But it will, if they're on a prescription drug that's causing that, then you obviously have to get them off of it.
Are there lasting effects?
No. Now, once you get them off of it, they're fine. Yeah. It's like a drug reaction. And the hospital psychosis.
Is that due to the anesthesia?
Yes. And it can take as long as a month for the anesthesia to be out of their system. Yeah. And then you think about, they're coming out from under anesthesia, which is going to have a stronger effect on them than, say, you and I. And then they're on pain medications, and whatever medications they were on before. So you have all these different interactions going on, and they're already, now they're confused, they're drugged, they're in a strange place. They got somebody poking and prodding at them. They've lost control of everything. So that hospitals don't teach this just floors me. It really, it's just criminal almost, So that's why I really put a lot of emphasis on this, because you can be your senior's advocate, yeah.
Is testing done locally? I was just curious, because years ago I knew someone that had to go to Portland to be tested, and that's extremely
Tested
hard.
for what?
Say, if it's Alzheimer's or dementia.
Well, first of all, you know that Alzheimer's is not truly diagnosable until after you die. Right? Did you know that? Only an autopsy can verify Alzheimer's. So when they are diagnosing that, they are doing it's a completely subjective diagnosis based on the symptoms. Okay? So the main differences between dementia and Alzheimer's is like I said, Alzheimer's progresses, where dementia doesn't have to. It can, but it doesn't have to. And dementia, something could be there today and gone tomorrow and then back again. But with Alzheimer's, once it's gone, it's gone. You cannot get it back. So for instance, like reading, maybe today I look at this and I'm like, I don't know some of these words. I used to know them, but I don't know them. And then tomorrow I know them again. With Alzheimer's, this reading is gone. It's just gone. It's something I cannot do again. So it is from the symptoms that they diagnose Alzheimer's, but it is not verifiable and fully diagnosed until an autopsy is performed, which typically they don't do because they're usually in their 90s and they're gone, and who's going to spend the money to do that?
Well, I guess I was asking because I was thinking, say an elderly person goes to a physician and the physician says, your family member or patient has dementia. What's the next step?
Well, the first step is to say, really? Well, let's do a blood test.
Is it blood test?
We're testing for these things. We're testing to find, we're doing a CBC panel. We're testing to see if they have a vitamin D or a vitamin B12 deficiency. We're testing to see if they have a urinary tract infection. We can test to see if they've had strokes or little TIAs, which are trans-ischemic attacks. We can check to see if they're dehydrated. So, they should be checking for these things. These are the common causes. And they should be asking, are they drinking all day long?
And they have a memory test.
Yeah, and then they do a cognitive rating kind of test too. But you could fail that and have one of these things. So these things definitely have to be done so that you can rule them out. And then once you rule them out and they have dementia, well, at that point they can't say whether it's Alzheimer's or dementia. All they know is that they have a memory issue, and then they wait and see. Now, some of them are actually related to other diseases. So if you have Parkinson's, likelihood you're going to have some memory. You're going to have some dementia. If you have, I can't think of, but there's a lot of, if you have stroke, you're going to have some dementia. Mm-hmm. So there are other diseases that will also cause that. Yeah.
They also did brain scan on my mother, PT scans, so they could see what areas of her brain
had been affected, right?
Affected more. They gave them an idea for what kind of mental issues she may have more trouble with. Like for her, it's more cognitive and making a decision and problem solving than it is her memory.
Right.
Focusing on a task and completing it. She has a hard time with that, but she can remember things better than I can.
Yeah, and it's not easy. I mean, I've been with clients who can track a conversation so well that you think there's nothing wrong with them. And they can go back 50 years and tell you all kinds of stories. Now, you don't know if those stories are real. So it sounds good, I mean, I was with a gentleman the other day, and I'm like, wow, okay. I mean, I know he's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I'm tracking it, and I'm like, I see some stuff. But it wasn't until the end when he said, I'm really glad you came and asked all these questions. I think they'll be really helpful for you to do your job. And I was like, okay, there it is. He totally made up a whole story of why I was there, which was completely different than the reason that I was there. So sometimes it's, I have actually had clients who were so good, that I had to fight. I had to actually call Adult Protective Services in to fight with me, to fight the family to get her the help she needed, because they were convinced, the neighbors were convinced, the nephews, the nieces, they were all convinced there was nothing wrong with this woman. But she was boiling her clothes on the stove in bleach and eating mayonnaise out of the jar. So it was definitely, but when they talked to her, she could maintain so well. So it was like, yeah.
Allie, are you going to speak about the aggression that comes?
Okay, so communication tips for seniors. You have this on your thing. For those with dementia or Alzheimer's, really important to keep it simple. Short, simple phrases. Repeat. Here's one of the things that people make a mistake about. So they say to them, I'm trying to think of a question. Did you brush your teeth today? And they don't get it. So when you woke up today, did you brush your teeth? They didn't get it. So, do you brush your teeth every day? See how each question's a little bit different? When you are asking somebody with dementia a question, you have to give them time to process, as much time as you possibly can. But the best way, not only is it simple, but it's always the same. Don't change it on them. If you ask them a question and they don't seem to understand, just give them time and then say the same exact words again, because you will get in there more than likely. But if you change it, it's like something totally new, and you're flipping their brain in other directions. I mean, it's, look for clues in the environment for your answers to your questions. So again, I'm not sure how to interpret this exactly in your work atmosphere, but once you understand the basics of this, you will then be able to do that for yourself. But even in your home atmosphere, I mean, if you walk in the door and there's piles of dishes and they're all old and crusty, you don't need to ask them when was the last time you ate. You can tell that it's been days since they ate because everything is old and crusty. So use the environment to get your clues about what's going on for that person. Don't ask open-ended questions. That sometimes it's really too hard for them to do that. So just ask yes or no questions, because that's easier for them to get. And when words don't come, listen for the hints, and again, repeat the phrase. We have a tendency to want to finish the sentence for them. Really try not to do that. Just give them the time. Always tell the person what you're doing before and during an action. So this really is important when they're in your chair. Every single thing you do, before, during, you should always tell them. And this is where a lot of people make a mistake, where they'll say, okay, Mrs. Jones, today we're going to take x-rays, and then we're going to, let's see, I'm trying to remember what we're doing there. And then we're going to take x-rays, and then we're going to clean your teeth, and the doctor's going to, you've lost them. Can't do that. So you're not even going to say, first we're going to do that. It's not until you're doing it. We're now going to put this on, the bib. There we go. We have it on now. And now we're going to open your mouth. So everything is broken down into one simple direction so that they can follow it. Yes?
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
You see the patient who has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and they've just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. How soon do you start in with that? Because you haven't done that before.
Right, no.
I mean, this man seems to be, he's connecting with me, we're carrying on conversations. I've talked to the wife, she says he's doing great, he may be in a trial for Alzheimer's. But I don't want to insult the man.
No, and you would not do these things until they're at the point where they really are beyond remembering anything. Okay, so, and I'm glad you asked that question. So just because somebody has dementia or Alzheimer's does not mean that you should be treating them any differently. Some of these things, yes. Some of them you do short, simple phrases. It's a lot easier on them. You will know when you start to confuse them because you'll see it in them, and they will break rapport with you. Yeah, look for the signs. Some of them are real obvious. There's like this. I mean, I used to have this man just he'd do that because he'd get so frustrated. The words were there, but he could not find them to get them out. So we changed our total approach with him. But you'll know if they're at that place where you need to start making modifications to your behavior, and that's really the key. It's about making modifications to your behavior so that you make life easier on them.
When it comes to the severe Alzheimer's patients, which I've done with my LAP, one of the nice things about them is if they're in a pretty far into their Alzheimer's, is that if they're starting to get uptight about it, you just stop.
Right.
Walk around the room, walking back to them. Hi, how are you?
I'll do.
And you're a new person,
Yep.
a new day, and you start over again. And you may only get 5 or 10 minutes with them, but it's not like the other mental problems where you don't want to upset them. You do as much as you can, stop. Do as much as you can, stop. Whereas a person who's just handicapped, you want to recreate the rapport. You're not working for rapport as much as getting it done and how you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, you're still working from rapport. You still are working because that emotional stuff will always be.
It's a short
But it is. Yeah, it's different. I mean, after working with over 1,000 people, I will tell you this, and I know that this is very hard for families who have suffered through the Alzheimer's with a parent. And so I say this with the utmost empathy and respect. But truthfully, when it comes to me, I would much rather have Alzheimer's than chronic pain. Okay? Because I have seen with the Alzheimer's, there is a point that they are very aware that they're forgetting. And that is the most troubling and frustrating time period for them. But when they make it over the edge where they have forgotten that they remember, they're happy. They can be very happy, okay? Their families, feel like we've lost something because they're not there anymore. They don't remember the past. That's the way we have it framed. But really, they are still there. In fact, they are more there in their truest being than they have ever been. And it's up to us to recognize that and to be present with them and enjoy the music, because life is juicy for them. It's so right here, right now. It's juicy. Food tastes different, okay? So, whereas with somebody with chronic pain, there is nothing you can do for them. They are so miserable. They can't move. I mean, the worst patient I had, she had such bad osteoporosis that every time she moved, a bone would crack. Imagine that. And so she'd just lay in bed and she'd be like this. Her whole body would be shaking from the pain. And all we could do was keep her drugged, and even that wasn't enough. And I would sit and breathe with her, and I would just, I would just imagine pulling that pain out of her, and she would have moments of relief, but I thought, man, I do not. And she the whole time so aware that she was in this pain and she couldn't, So there's something to be said about just forgetting. Don't correct, just validate, and that kind of goes to with what you're saying. That's another thing that we tend to do is, oh, take this towel off. Oh, you mean the apron? Yeah, why? Give me that sugar. I want the water. I want the water. You don't have to check, because that doesn't serve them and it doesn't serve us, right? So don't question or don't correct or invalidate them. Make sure the environment is not too stimulating. And this is very true, especially if they're in your chair and they have dementia. If you've got, I know like for me, maybe you have the music on, maybe you have the TV up there and it's on. But for someone with dementia, that all might be just too much. And you want to kind of maybe even bring the lights down, turn the sound down. Maybe music is soothing, maybe it's not. You have to play with it and watch for your clues.
Are you going to make it better
to try to have them think for themselves, or are you better just to, like the other day, my sister wants my mom to think for herself, and I want to just go ahead and, do
Make it
for
easy.
her.
Yeah. Make it easy.
Make it easy.
Yeah, again, if you're asking her to make a decision and she's flippant about it and she's like, yes, okay, I want that. Well, then she's okay with doing that. But if you see in her, that, confusion, stress, then why would you do that? Why would you do that? Yeah, no. You're right. Your sister's wrong. Have her call me. I think we covered all those, and now we're going to go into what your question was earlier. I think it was you saying what an adverse behavior. So, with dementia and Alzheimer's, people know that there are times when we have adverse behaviors, and those could be things like a hallucination or constant crying or not being able to sleep. They got sundowners and they're up all night long, or they're verbally abusive. All of a sudden, this sweet old man wants to have sex with every caregiver that walks in the door, okay? I mean, look, it happens, okay? They're full of rage and irritation, or they're totally non-responsive. But the key is this: an adverse behavior could be all those, as long as all those are unusual for that person. But if you have somebody who all her life she was a weepy, well, then that's not unusual. It's not an adverse behavior. If you have somebody who's always, her life she's been a screamy Mimi, then that's not unusual. If you've had somebody who has always been kind of a recluse and quiet, then that's not unusual. But for a recluse to all had to be chatty, whoa, there's something going on here. Something's different, okay? That is the key thing. Somebody who has always slept well, who's not sleeping, or somebody who's never slept well, who all of a sudden is sleeping. Even if it looks like it's positive, okay? Even if it looks like, oh, this is a good thing that this is happening finally, it is something different, and you need to be checking this out, okay? What makes an adverse behavior worsen? Ignoring, not validating, arguing and contradicting, and surprisingly, weather changes. Weather changes, any change in the environment, full moons, wind. Amazing how, we know this with children. Anybody who's ever been around a lot of little kids in daycare, if it was a windy day, it's like, oh no, it's a windy day. They're going to make us crazy. So it's the same with, because they're so aware on a different level. They're so connected on a different level, and they're so present in the moment that they are affected by these things. So, this is something you have to write down. Sorry. No, I wanted you to have to fill in the blanks a little bit too.
Well.
Yeah.
And when you have arthritis, you do know that they can tell the weather in their bones.
Yes, absolutely.
Atmospheric pressure.
Yep.
That's why arthritis is better over here, because we have less
atmosphere.
pressure.
Huh. Wow. And we have less dampness too.
Yes.
So.
But you can, when a high comes in, you can feel it.
Right. Yeah. Thermometer changes. Yeah, and this is, these are very basic things, and when you think about it, if you have any questions about it, I'm brought it in the, trying to keep up with the time here. When you are invalidating, like what you were saying, when your sister wants your mother to make a decision, if that's really something that she cannot do, and it comes completely from your sister's need to make mom okay in her mind, right, in her own mind, not in mom's mind, she's not validating her in that moment. She's not accepting where mom is, and she's trying to force and push. And that is so common. So I have empathy and compassion for what your sister's trying to do. And in talking to her about it, rather than doing it just from your mom's perspective of what mom's experience is, you want to validate, I know, sis, it's so hard to see mom in this place, and you want so much to make her okay.
It's hard to accept.
But
Yeah,
it
there were
is.
6 of us kids, and
Yeah.
one of my brothers just expected dad, you just can't do it. Yeah.
Right.
You're okay. You were dad.
Right. You're dad. You cannot not be okay. Right. Did everybody get these down? Anybody have any questions about them? All righty then. So what to do when you're working with people with Alzheimer's and dementia? To me, it was the most fun of all the people that I worked with, I loved working with my Alzheimer's and dementia patients. I never knew. It really required me to use my problem-solving skills, and it was like a puzzle. So you assess the situation, you stop and think, you assess the situation, you consider it a puzzle, and you buy in enough to create trust. So a lot of times with dementia and Alzheimer's, we'll just call it dementia so I don't have to say that Alzheimer's all the time. Patients experience hallucinations and delusions. Does anybody know the difference between a hallucination and a delusion? So a hallucination is something you see or hear that isn't really there. That's why it's a hallucination. A delusion is something you believe. It's not something you see, it's something you believe. Like maybe you believe there's little men that are landing on the planet, you know, or you believe your dead husband is coming to get you for dinner. So it's a belief that something out there is going to happen. But when it's a hallucination, it's that spider on the wall, okay? So when this is really common because they're talking, you know, and sometimes you can't tell. The worst thing you can do when someone is talking about either a hallucination or a delusion is to tell them it's not real. Because who wants to be told they're crazy, right? So you have to buy in enough to gain their trust, but not so deep that you now are in trouble. For instance, you know, mom says, that, oh my God, there's a big, this actually happened. I won't even say mom. So we had a client who saw a spider this big on the wall. And at first the caregiver was like, well, there's no spider there. Oh, you don't see it? Now I'm even more in danger because now you don't see it either, right? Okay, so imagine that's so the patient's like, no, it's right there. And then the caregiver says, oh, I'll get it. You missed it, it's over there. Oh, no, you missed it, it's over there. So she calls me all frantic and I said, just say to her, oh, I see it. Okay, let's leave the room and I'll call somebody to come and kill it. That's buying in enough to say, yes, it's there and here's a solution, right? It's that simple. It's that simple. I was sitting with a couple or a client who, now this woman had Parkinson's. So she was not demented. But with Parkinson's, when you're on this Parkinson's medications for a long time, you can have hallucinations and delusions. So here she is sitting there, she has a whole group of social workers and APS is there, everybody's there. And all because she is hearing voices in her air conditioner, which is in the window. And they're trying to convince her that that is just not so, that it's these drugs, that it's, here's the data, look, this is what it says, when you're on these medications, you're gonna have hallucinations, you're gonna have this stuff. And she is getting angrier and angrier and frustrated and more scared because, and she's, I'm not crazy, it's not, and finally I just couldn't stand it anymore, because I'm not the professional, right? So I just couldn't stand it and I'm like, stop. I said, I think I know what it is. And she's like, what? And I said, oh my God, Phyllis. So I get down on my knees, of course, and I pull out my cell phone. I said, you know what this is? This is a cell phone. You know how this works? And she's like, no. I said, well, there's this thing out in space. And when I turn this on and I punch a number, it sends a signal, just like your TV and your radio. It sends a signal out in space to that satellite, and then that satellite sends it back to Earth to the phone of the person I'm calling. Does it make sense? You get that? And she's like, yeah. I said, I think what's happening is it's bouncing off of your air conditioner. So you're hearing the communication, that's the signal. And she's like, that's it. Of course. I said, so let's have fun with it. Next time you hear it, write it down so we can know what they're saying. This could be, I mean, is it a couple? Is it a guy? Is it a girl? What's going on? Oh, it became a game. It was fun. She wasn't scared anymore. Okay? So I bought in enough to say, you're not crazy, it's okay, but not so much that I was like, well, I'm going to sit here with you and I'm going to wait. Oh, I don't hear it. I don't hear it. Oh, I hear it now. Really? What are they saying? Are they saying this? I don't know. You know, right? So that's why it is fun. I had one lady, I can tell you all the stories in the world, but this one is the classic one. So she was convinced that somebody had come and stolen all her furniture. Anybody had that happen with? Okay, well, it's really common. They think somebody's stealing stuff. So the caregiver's like, no, it's all here. Look, no, it's not here. It's all my furniture is gone. So they call me up. What do? I said, all right, have her describe the furniture. Describe what's missing. And then take her to dinner and tell her while she's at dinner, Allie is going to go get her furniture and bring it back. And when you come back to the room, I want you to go, oh my gosh, Beverly, I think this is your furniture. Isn't this the blue couch with the flower print? It is. And isn't this the lamp with the little dingy bollies? It is. Well, she was so happy. Her furniture was back. It lasted for about 3 days, and lo and behold, somebody came, took her furniture again. So we did the whole routine again. It happened 3 different times. And you know what this woman said? Boy, that Allie, this is costing her a lot of money. But I was her hero, man. I was her hero. So you buy in enough, you figure out the puzzle. The intention you have is to make them feel safe. That's it. If that's all you keep, like, how do I give enough to make her feel safe? I mean, I've had them where, my dead husband, Harold's here. Oh, Harold's here. Well, would you mind asking Harold if it's okay if the 2 of us go for a walk? I'm not going to go sit down on Harold. I'm not going to have a conversation with Harold. But I am going to validate that that's what she sees, and that's perfectly fine, but we need to go do something right now. What not to do? Oh, guys, do not revisit. That is the biggest mistake people make. Like, this client says, this caregiver stinks. She stinks. I'm like, all right, well, you know what? I understand. Stink bothers me too. I'm going to bring something over. I come over. I had a little spray bottle. I was going to spray and make everything okay. But I did not walk in the door saying, I brought my spray bottle. I just went in and said, hey, here to visit you. Waiting to see. Does she remember? No, totally forgot all about it. I'm like, all right, Carol, no problem anymore. So that is a piece that people forget. They always want to go back and go, so now are you okay? Like, oh, you just started it all over again, right? And then the other things I think we already talked about. Oh, sorry, I forgot. You're writing it down. Now, argue or contradict. Buy in too deep. Take things personally. Don't take things personally. This poor caregiver, I mean, really, this was an actual thing. And she's like, I took a shower. I'm like, I know, it's okay. And don't say the first thing that comes to you. Sometimes you have to think. And that's the wonderful thing about seniors. They will give you all the time in the world. So take your time to think through what it is you want to say. Everybody got that piece? What you can do to change adverse behaviors, and that's partly what you were talking about. First of all, change the environment. If they are irritated or anxious or displaying some kind of behavior that isn't what you want at that moment, then change the environment. Just move them into the other room. Open up a window, turn the lights down, put on some music, turn it off. Look for some way to change the environment. Just that sometimes is enough to just kind of calm things down. Exercise and movement is really huge. If you could just get them up and moving, sometimes the frustration and the anxiety gets locked energetically in their bodies. If any of you know anything about, body energy, it actually physically gets kind of trapped in there, and moving helps to release that. Sometimes you just need to leave them alone. I have a new adopted little grandbaby, and they have all these gadgets now, which they didn't have when we were raising babies, but so that you're always holding them. Have you seen them? They wrap on it. So mom is always holding him. Everywhere she goes, she's got this big belly in front of her, and I'm like, well, do you ever just kind of let him lay down? Oh, why would you do that? I'm like, because we want to be untouched sometimes. Sometimes that's what we want, And so if he gets really cranky, sometimes you just want to be left alone. And remember that sometimes when you have dementia and Alzheimer's, you don't have the words anymore. You don't have the capacity to communicate clearly what it is you want. So you, as the caregiver or the worker or whatever your relationship is, it's up to you to really play the guessing game and try to figure it out. And that's why these are really important skills to learn. Distracting or diverting, Sure, yeah, oh my gosh, it's so typical. That woman, who was that? You're saying that no, who was that? Was it you? The woman who's been in the facility for only 2 months and It was you, right. You know, so you distract and you divert. Yes, I know, it's really hard and you want to go home and we'll talk about that later, but right now we need to go and have dinner. Or right now, you know, you mentioned earlier that you had these pictures, I really want to see them. So you don't invalidate by saying, well, we were here yesterday, but that's an invalidation. That's an argument or contradiction. That's what the kids are doing, and that scares her, right? So instead, and I'm not saying that she has Alzheimer's or dementia, but you can still use these same tactics with someone who is way at the beginning and feeling the stress. And anytime, you know, 92 years old, you're changing her whole life. You're changing her routine. And when we change routines, we cause stress. When we cause stress, we cause memory loss. Right? We cause memory loss, we cause confusion, we get them below the line. And so if we argue or we contradict, then we're just increasing the level of anxiety. Whereas if we simply validate, like, you know, yeah, I know, it's, you know, this is probably not where you want to be and we could talk about it, but right now we need to do this. So we just divert it, or we distract with, oh, I had to tell you this. You know, I had a woman who was convinced that she didn't want to eat anymore. She didn't want to eat anymore. She told the caregiver to throw all the food away. So the caregiver calls me and says, oh, what do I do? And I'm like, well, follow the directions. Throw everything away. And of course, throw it nicely so that we can replace it, put it back in. But for now, you know, it's all in bags and nice. And I said, and tomorrow when you go to work, I want you to stop and buy some chocolate eclairs. Because this woman has decided she doesn't want to eat anymore, she wants to die. Buy chocolate eclairs. And when you get there, I want you to tell her it's your birthday. And you would like her to celebrate your birthday with you. And here's the chocolate eclairs. Well, of course she wasn't going to say no. I mean, she loves this caregiver, so of course, and then, you know, sugar makes you hungry. And all of a sudden she's like, I'm hungry, what do we have in the house to eat? So before you know, we got all the food out. So it's just, you do what you have to do and then you do something different to get it changed. Give them comfort, chunk it down, make it simple. Sit and listen for clues. And then if needed, give them a PRN. Give them a medication. So there are a lot of medications out there, and I didn't go into that because I didn't figure it's something you need. But there are medications that help with some of the adverse behaviors. When providing care or assistance to someone who has dementia or Alzheimer, remember, first you got to assess your state. If you aren't in your most creative, most empathetic, most patient, most resourceful state, then it's probably not likely you're going to be very successful in helping them through theirs. So just like above the line thing, you have to figure out a way to make yourself okay. And sometimes that means you can't be there, and that's okay. You need to listen carefully before you respond, keep it simple, redirect, find your compassion, be creative. Yes. So, what you've learned. You've learned how to consciously build rapport with somebody. You have learned how to help an irate or upset person come above or at least to neutral so that you can help communicate with them. You've learned how to give bad news without getting shot. You have learned the unique habits of communication styles of seniors and the characteristics and values, which hopefully you'll be able to apply in working with your clientele. You've understood the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's and how to, what the common causes are and what to do and what not to do. And you understand now what an adverse behavior is. So you have a lot of new skills to use in your life. And, you know, it all really comes down to communication being the meaning of your communication is the response it elicits. And that is true of every age group, and it's true of whether or not you're working with somebody who has Alzheimer's and dementia or not, because whatever response they give you is an indicator of how good you are at giving them the information and the meaning that you want. So, once there was this Zen master and his one-eyed student, and they lived in a monastery way up in the mountains. And one day a traveling monk came across this beautiful monastery, and he went to the Zen master and he said, "Oh, master, if you will allow it, I would love to stay here and study under you." And the old Zen master looked at him and said, all right, well, before you decide, I'd like you to go out to the garden and find my student and talk with him in any manner you wish. And once you do, make your decision and then come back and tell me. Well, the young traveling monk was very excited and actually very nervous because he really wanted to impress the Zen master. And so he thought, I'm going to go and talk to this student and I'm going to be as profound as I can be. I will speak to him in sign language. So he goes out to the garden and there he finds the one-eyed student sitting on the ground in meditation. And he taps him on the shoulder and he puts out one finger. And the one-eyed student puts out 2 fingers. And the traveling monk puts out 3 fingers, to which the one-eyed student put up his fist. And at that moment, the traveling monk went running back to the garden to find the Zen master. And when he found him doing his chores, he said, oh, master, I can't stay. I am so below what this superior student of yours is like. I just don't deserve to study with him. And the Zen master said, are you talking about the one-eyed student in the garden? And the traveling monk says, oh yes, he is so amazing, and his intellect and his understanding is so far superior than mine. And the Zen master said, well, wait a minute, can you tell me what happened? And he said, well, I went to the garden and I found him in his repose meditating. And so I really wanted to impress him, and I talked to him in sign language, and I put up one finger to mean the Buddha, to which the student put up 2 fingers, indicating the Buddha and the Dharma, his teachings. Well, I wanted to keep this conversation going, so I put up 3 fingers, indicating the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, his community. And that, master, is when the student showed me the limitation of my understanding, for he put up his fist, indicating that they are all one. And so, master, I don't deserve to be here. And with that, he turned around and he left. Well, the Zen master was just standing there, wow, when all of a sudden, out of the garden comes the one-eyed student, ranting and yelling, where is that scoundrel? Where is he? How dare he insult me? And the Zen master said, wait, tell me what happened. And he says, well, I was sitting in the garden, minding my own business in a beautiful meditation, when this intruder interrupted. And he came and he tapped me on the shoulder and he put up 1 finger, indicating that I had only 1 eye. And trying to be polite, I put up 2 fingers, congratulating him on having 2 eyes. And that is when he insulted me further by putting up 3 fingers, indicating that there were only 3 good eyes between us, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I put up my fist to punch him in his nose, and he ran away. The meaning of your communication is the response it elicits. Thank you.